This is an enterprise technology management podcast, the independent resource for IT executives.
Hello and welcome to this podcast brought to you by ETM, a website and magazine for IT executives. ETM keeps the IT community informed through educational podcasts, white papers, analyst research and case studies. I'm David Tran from ETM and the host of this podcast. Our guest on today's podcast is Shahin Pirooz from CenterBeam. Shahin is the Executive Vice President, Chief Security Officer and Chief Technology Officer. Welcome, Shahin, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Today, we have a very informative discussion with Shahin on cloud computing, covering the critical aspects of security, virtual data centers, and developing trends. But first, Shahin, can we have a brief introduction to CenterBeam?
Sure. CenterBeam was founded in 1999 around the concept of delivering enterprise 100 class services to the mid-market. We built our solutions as becoming one of the first software as a service companies to deliver multi-tenant exchange as one of our core foundation services, and delivered a lot of remote management capabilities for the mid-market enterprises. Over the last 10 years, we've developed a lot of experience and gained a lot of traction in delivering not only the SaaS services we developed up front, but also a lot of cloud capabilities to allow customers to virtualize their environments and move their physical equipment out of their infrastructure and move it to a virtual cloud-based data center.
Okay, that's quite a nice insight there as to the history of your company. That's quite a long time for a company in IT years, so I'm sure our listeners can gain some valuable insight from today's discussion. And now that we know more about the company, let's move on to an area you're a particular expert in and something that's always on top of the mind for our listeners, which is security. As Chief Security Officer, what do you see as the most important considerations when it comes to security, especially concerning the cloud?
Sure. I think that security is one of the most misused and misunderstood terms in the market, and specifically as it relates to the cloud. The primary reason for that is that word is being heavily fueled by media, and there's a lot of concern about, will my data be safe in the cloud? How can I trust it in somebody else's data center? And I think the underlying concern or uncertainty that's being generated is that people don't know what to ask or what to focus their questions on. For example, secure as opposed to what is a primary question that often comes to my mind. And really the answer is, if you look at existing environments today, specifically in the mid-market, some of the enterprise companies have this nailed down, but there's not a lot of time and money spent on securing infrastructure. And the concern that the cloud environments are less secure than local infrastructure is often really just fueled, again, by the media threats that have happened. The reality is that the security mishaps that we see in the market and the media are actually generated by poor development, by developers that do integration between the cloud and the internal environment. They create holes in the applications they write, and those holes are used to compromise data. Or there's a set of open APIs that the cloud provider provides that can be used equally by hackers as well as the developers that are trying to do that integration. So when you talk about security, you should really be considering security just as if you would in your own data center. You should have firewalls before and after your DMZ environment. You should not allow direct access to your core infrastructure. And you should follow the best practices that you would if you were building your own data center. And there's nothing new in that statement, but don't change the way you do things and the experience and lessons you've learned over the years as an IT expert simply because the solution is in a cloud versus in your data center.
Fabulous insight again. We're also hearing a lot about virtual data centers. Could you tell us more about it and how is it different from cloud computing?
Absolutely. Virtual data center is really nothing more than taking what typically customers would call their co-location facilities and moving that into a cloud provider's infrastructure and delivering it as a virtual infrastructure versus a physical infrastructure. The word cloud has really become something that is it covers a lot of topics, and in order for a customer to get their head around it, there's different components that have been delivered out of the cloud. All virtual data center is another way of delivering cloud services. A lot of providers out there that call themselves cloud providers today are really delivering only infrastructure as a service or only platform as a service. In a infrastructure as a service provider, when you go to implement a 4-tiered application, for example, you would have to build each of those 4 tiers yourself. So you would provision your virtual private server on that platform, and you would configure the application server. You would configure the database server. You would configure the web front end, and you would configure your terminal services to deliver the client application to the end users. What we've done that's different in a virtual data center model is we've built out a solution that is all 4 tiers by building out infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and application/desktop as a service so that a customer can take advantage of the tier appropriate to deliver their application. By doing all this, we've taken and we've converted a non-SaaS application that typically a customer might have and enable that application to become SaaSable by giving them all 4 tiers in the cloud that they don't have to have subject matter expertise on. So really the difference between a virtual data center in my mind and traditional cloud is that it's enabling you to do what you used to do in a physical data center but in the virtual world.
That's a fantastic insight into cloud solutions particularly. And what is your position on hybrid cloud?
I feel there should be no exception to the requirement that a hybrid cloud is the only way to go. Hybrid clouds are no more than an integrated system of services, some within your facilities or co-location environments and some within a cloud provider. There is some workloads that are not yet fully capable of being moved into the cloud unless you move the entire application ecosystem to the cloud. For some customers, that's not a possibility because they can't either afford to or they've got a capital investment sunk into their existing environment, so it doesn't financially make sense to pick up everything and move it into the cloud. So what the hybrid cloud enables is the customer moves at their own pace as opposed to the pace of the provider. So we embrace the hybrid cloud, and we actually recommend that customers embrace the hybrid cloud as well.
As we all know, the IT landscape is constantly changing, but looking forwards, what do you see as the biggest game changers today in cloud infrastructure?
Well, if you were to pay attention to the media, there's a lot of advertising dollars being thrown around by the giants like Microsoft and Google, trying to depict the trend being collaboration as the next thing that everybody adopts in context of Google Apps and Microsoft Online services, as well as our own CenterBeam 365 services. But the reality is, as I mentioned earlier, we released multi-tenant Exchange over a decade ago. So collaboration is not new to the market space. It continues to evolve and more capabilities are added to it. But if I were to talk about trends, my beliefs are that really where we're going in context of the cloud environment is more and more customers are starting to consider 2 things. The first is they don't want to refresh their hardware anymore. They're tired of the 4 or 5 year cycles where they're constantly having to rebuild their infrastructure and manage it again. By moving to a virtual workload model, both in a hybrid and a cloud-hosted model, they're able to remove that concept of hardware refresh. The second component that's really critical here is that customers are having to, historically up until now, are having to modify their business processes to fit cloud providers or SaaS providers' constraints, because those applications that have traditionally been put into a SaaS environment or a cloud environment have been restricted by the ISV so that you get less functionality than what you used to in your local environment. Our approach from the ground up has been to enable as much customization as possible in the cloud environment so that the customer brings their policies rather than CenterBeam forcing our policies onto the customer. The importance of that fact is that business processes should be driving decisions like they used to prior to the concept of cloud and SaaS in terms of what partners to pick, what technologies to pick, and the applications should be picked to align with their business strategies and policies, not picking a partner and then modifying your processes to fit to the customer. So I think the trend that I see coming is one where more and more will be delivered out of the cloud, less and less infrastructure in the customer environment, but cloud providers are going to have to shift their thinking to enable more flexibility and more security so that the customer can bring their policies and procedures and apply them to the cloud environment, not the reverse.
Okay, great viewpoints and insight there. Well, we have certainly covered a lot in this discussion and can take away some important messages, but just to sum up, you've pointed out the advantages of the cloud, but so for somebody looking to move into the cloud, what words of advice do you have for them?
So I think we've talked a lot about picking the right partner, picking somebody who can grow with you, who has the scope and breadth of capabilities that allow you to move additional workloads beyond single-point solutions into their environment. But I think the underlying message that I would recommend to the listeners as they're thinking about moving more and more workloads to the cloud is you've got to pick a partner that has solid integration experience, not just somebody that says, here's the keys, go ahead, fill your boots. Somebody who's got live support so that you're not relying on wikis and forums for answers when you run into troubles. And again, somebody with the breadth of services so that after you deploy the point solution you're working on today, and you think about additional workloads you want to move to the cloud, you don't have to pick multiple providers. You can pick a provider that will grow and scale with you. And then finally, what we talked about previously, which is flexibility to not only enable you to do what you do today, but in the cloud, but enable you to modify what you do today, and the platform can support you. So I think really picking somebody who can grow and scale with you and doesn't constrain you or doesn't force you to do things that modify your business processes is probably the biggest message that somebody looking to move to the cloud should pull from today's podcast.
Wow, that's a fantastic summary there. Thank you for all your insights, Shahin, but unfortunately that's all we have time for. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, likewise.
For more podcasts and information on the latest IT developments and trends, please visit globaletm.com. Thank you for listening.